Thank you for that. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much once again for joining us today as we embark on talking about resources and learning about resources and legal rights for the immigrant community, especially during COVID-19. My name is Inaudi Esposito. I am the Executive Director for the Orange County Human Rights Commission. I use the pronouns she, her, and ella. And as many of you know, the mission of the Human Rights Commission is to bring communities together and also to bring education and awareness around issues affecting oppressed communities. Today's forum is actually part of a virtual series we've been hosting these last few months to ensure that our community has access to these really vital conversations. Before we begin, we just want to go over a few housekeeping issues. So the first thing is that this forum is being recorded and everybody is on mute. So please make sure that your phone is always on mute so that the speakers don't have any background noise present. If you have the capacity to, if you could please turn your camera on. As presenters, it's always so helpful to see people's faces engaged in conversations in the presentation. So we really do appreciate it if you could do that, if you have the ability to. And then finally, we are asking that everybody hold your questions and add them to the chat box. So you think of something important that you really want to know, that you're curious about, please just go ahead and type it into the chat box. I will be monitoring the chat box throughout the entire time. And then at the end, we will make sure to get to most of the questions, hopefully all of the questions, and our presenters will be ready to answer them. So speaking of our presenters, today we'll be hearing some really great information and resources from two partner agencies doing really great work with the immigrant community. First up, we have representing Legal Services of the Hudson Valley. We have here with us today Sharon Ramos, paralegal with the Domestic Violence and Immigration Unit. We also have Tim Pavelka. Tim Pavelka, staff attorney, also with the Domestic Violence and Immigration Unit, and also Jillian Menza, who is the supervising attorney for the Domestic Violence Immigration Unit. So thank you again all for being here. Jillian, thank you for bringing your team on board with us, and all you, take it away.
Thank you so much, Inaudi, for having us. I hope everyone can hear me. If not, please type away in the chat box to let me know. But I'm going to get started here, and we wanted to start off with a poll. It's 2 questions, and we just kind of wanted to gauge everyone's work a little bit about, you know, what if you do work with undocumented clients and what your familiarity is with the case types that we handle. So I'm going to launch the poll in a moment and give you all a few minutes to participate. All right, we're going to close the poll in about 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And share the results here. So it looks like a good number of the folks on this call do work with undocumented clients, so that's really great to see. For the second polling question, it was a little bit of a trick question there. You know, potentially all types of this relief could be available to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. However, we primarily handle cases that are immigration cases that are directly linked to domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. So we don't handle family-based cases like Petition sponsored by a US citizen relative where there isn't DV, sexual assault, or human trafficking. So a little bit of a trick question there. Thank you for your participation. I promise by the end of this, you're gonna have a lot more information about the T visa, the VAWA self-petition, the asylum type case, and some other cases that are available to survivors. So the first thing that we wanted to cover was just talking about how the immigrant community has been particularly impacted by COVID-19. What we know in our work is that this community has been hit particularly hard by COVID-19, that there have been health impacts and economic impacts on this community. So in terms of the health impacts, what we're seeing and what we're learning is that there's a higher risk of exposure to COVID, as many of our clients cannot simply work from home in the work that they're doing. We have clients who are involved in jobs where they're interacting with larger numbers of people. We have quite a few clients who are working in factories, or they're working cleaning facilities or hospitals, essential businesses. Some of our clients are working in restaurants and grocery stores or making deliveries. And so all of those settings make folks particularly vulnerable to COVID. In addition, there's also this added issue that folks are less likely to seek testing or care if they are undocumented due to fear of deportation. Our clients, anytime that they're having an interaction with a government entity or an entity that is not 100% trusted, it is a deterrent to them seeking out services. So that is an added layer that complicates things for our clients in this community. In terms of the economic impact, unfortunately, undocumented clients or members of this community have been left out of the stimulus package, so they're not eligible for unemployment benefits. So what we're seeing is that many of our clients have lost their jobs and they have no recourse. They have no money coming in, and it's been extremely difficult for these clients. In addition, in terms of the stimulus payments, the $1,200 checks that a lot of people have received, our clients are predominantly not eligible for these. You have to have a Social Security number to be able to receive a stimulus payment, which many of our clients do not have. In addition, a lot of our clients are not eligible for public assistance like food stamps, and have had to rely heavily on food banks for food and other community resources. And the reality is that when COVID hit, these food banks were really struggling in terms of having enough resources for everyone. It's been extremely difficult in that regard as well. In addition, we're now seeing the issue of the lifting of the eviction moratorium in the state of New York. And that is going to further complicate things for our clients who, because of the factors I just went over, have had difficulty maintaining any income during this time. So that's just some general information about the challenges that we're seeing for our clients in this community, which has been hit particularly hard by the public health emergency. What we wanted to talk about next is what government entities, federal agencies, our clients may have contact with, and just kind of go over each one of them that we see most often, and give you an idea of who they are, what they do, and how our clients might be involved with them. So the first one, I'm sure that many of you have heard of ICE, which stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is an agency, it's a federal agency that is a branch of the Department of Homeland Security. The agency is responsible for monitoring certain undocumented individuals and enforcing immigration laws. For these, for our clients who are actually already known to ICE and are in court proceedings, they're in immigration court, their interaction with ICE looks like monitoring. So ICE may be monitoring them. They might have an ankle monitor that they're wearing and have to report for regular check-ins. Typically before COVID hit, these check-ins were in person in Manhattan or the Bronx, which is a particularly difficult place to get for someone up in Orange County, especially with limited resources. Right now, due to COVID, these check-ins are being conducted by phone primarily, unless there's some sort of emergency. And it's really important to keep in mind the consequences for our clients should they miss an ICE check-in. Missing an ICE check-in could result in an order of removal or other consequences that could negatively impact their cases. So oftentimes we are really struggling to get our clients to these check-ins and trying to help them navigate public transportation or find other resources to get them to these check-ins because they are crucial to their health and well-being. For those who are not in under ICE supervision already or in immigration court proceedings, ICE officers, it's part of their job to detain undocumented individuals, to search for them and detain them. This creates an environment where many of our clients have fear of accessing government entities, as we've discussed before, accessing healthcare, seeking out police assistance, really any contact with a government entity or an entity that is an unknown can cause a lot of stress and anxiety for our clients. The next agency that I wanted to mention, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tim, is USCIS. This is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Again, this is a federal agency. It's under the Department of Homeland Security. And what they do is they process and make decisions on immigration applications that are not in immigration court. So this person, it has no immigration court involvement, but is seeking some sort of immigration relief and would apply to this agency to obtain immigration relief. Under COVID, they have not been accepting in-person interviews at USCIS offices. That is changing now. They are gradually rescheduling interviews and appointments for in-person meetings at USCIS. They have, throughout COVID, continued to accept new immigration applications, but for cases where they would need to meet with a client to decide the case, those interviews have been on hold. They are accepting things a bit differently at USCIS. They're willing to accept copies of signed documents, recognizing that it's hard to meet with clients right now and may be unsafe. So they've modified that. They accept the applications by mail and are also accepting electronic filings. So I am going to turn it over to Tim to talk about immigration court.
Thank you, Jillian. So I just wanted to briefly go over the immigration court. If you ever see the acronym EOIR, that stands for the Executive Office for Immigration Review, and that's just the official name for immigration court. The immigration court is housed under the Department of Justice, so it's another federal agency. And then I'll just sort of say that the reason that someone gets into immigration court is so that they can be, the government can determine if they can be removed from the United States. So the way it'll usually work for someone in court is they'll sort of be charged with being here without permission. And then most often you sort of say, yeah, I didn't have permission to be here, but I have this other reason that allows me to stay. And we'll go over a couple of those kinds of cases later on. In New York City, all hearings for non-detained individuals, so anyone who's sort of still out in the community, all those have been postponed. Those hearings have been postponed through July 6th. We're still sort of going at it kind of like every 2 weeks, they sort of reassess, although it does seem that we are getting much closer to courts reopening in some fashion. I know that personally I've had a few hearings during coronavirus that have been postponed for the fall. So we'll see if that, if that plays out. It's important to note that many deadlines are still in effect. For example, there's a 1-year filing deadline for an asylum application. That deadline is not waived. You very much have to timely file those applications. But other deadlines that are maybe tied to the hearing date, like any supporting documents you might file before your hearing, those will sort of move with the new trial date or hearing date, whenever that is. The Immigration Court has temporarily been accepting electronic filings in addition to their paper filings. And they have also allowed electronic signatures. So we've been able to utilize a DocuSign or an Adobe fill-in sign, something like that to help more easily file some of these documents that need signatures. So next I want to just briefly talk about how our agency has changed how we're handling cases. We're trying to change as little as possible, but there have been some modifications, of course. We're still open. Our intake is still open, and we're taking new cases. We're doing a lot more interviewing over the phone or video chat. We're utilizing DocuSign or other ways to do electronic signatures. And in the situations where we can't do an electronic signature, we will, print out just signature pages, send those in the mail with a return envelope, and have those come back to us so that we can file them the way that we need. So getting those pages and other supporting documents is certainly more of a challenge and does slow the process, but we're also utilizing apps that allow you to scan documents. Because in almost all cases, we can submit copies of documents. And so scanning those via phone apps and sending them through email is usually okay. Some applications require passport photos, and we are able to print those at home in some cases, or maybe use other services through, say, like Target as an example, where they can print and then mail out passport photos. So kind of with all that, so we're trying to handle cases as normally as possible. And our offices actually will begin reopening July 6th, but we'll continue to handle any immigration matters almost entirely remotely and sort of see how things progress from there. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jillian, and we'll start talking about a few different case types.
Thank you, Tim. All right. So generally speaking, our office handles immigration cases on behalf of victims of crime, domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. So I'm going to start going through some of the most prominent case types that we handle, and giving you just a general idea of what they are, and we'll provide an example for each case type so you can get a sense of what this actually looks like for folks. So the first case that we handle, a lot of these are called U visas. And these are visas that are available to victims of crime who were helpful to law enforcement in investigating or prosecuting the crime. It has to be a qualifying crime. So victims of domestic violence, victims of sex crimes, all of those crimes would be qualifying crimes. So the way this looks is the first step is identifying whether there is a law enforcement agency that would certify that the client was a victim of the qualifying crime, and that they were helpful to the police department or the DA's office in their investigation or prosecution of the crime. And if you obtain that certification, you can then submit an application to USCIS there's a lot of other components of the application that I won't go over, but that is generally what a U visa case is. And I am going to share my screen so that you can see a case example, and I'll read through it with you. All right. Okay, so do you see the screen? Thumbs up? Yes? Okay. So we have Claudia, who came to the United States in 2016 with her children by crossing the US-Mexico border. Claudia did not encounter ICE or CBP. She did not come in contact with anyone from the US government. She came to live in Newburgh, where she had family. She began dating someone named Marco, who she met through a friend at work. Marco appeared very nice at first. They would go to the park on walks, and he asked her to move in with him after 6 months of dating. Claudia was really excited by their possible future together. And this would also enable Claudia to save a lot of money. She had kids, and she'd be able to devote more of her income instead of paying rent to her kids. After they moved in, Marco became abusive. One day he physically attacked Claudia. She was able to hide in her bedroom and call the police. She made a statement to the police department and obtained a criminal order of protection. Marco was arrested in connection with the crime, and Claudia spoke with the DA's office as they prepared the case against Marco and complied with any requests they had for information. Marco ended up pleading guilty to second-degree harassment. So that is an example of a pretty strong U visa case. There are other factors that we have to look into when filing these, but in terms of the helpfulness and the qualifying crime, all of those elements are there in this example with Claudia. So the next case type are T visas. And T visas are somewhat similar to U visas in some ways, except that this visa type is available specifically to victims of severe trafficking. It could be labor trafficking, so trafficking to the United States to work, forced labor. It could be sex trafficking. The person who is a victim of this crime must be physically present in the United States or at a port of entry because of the trafficking. So they must have been brought here because of the trafficking. And they must have remained in the United States since the most recent act of trafficking. For those 18 years of age or older, they have to have complied with reasonable requests from the agency investigating or prosecuting the trafficking for information. So like a U visa, similar in that way. And there's also, there has to have be a risk of suffering extreme hardship if they were to be removed from the United States. So again, I'm going to share a short example with you. Okay. 1 minute. Okay. So in this example, we have Mari. She's 17. She's a 17-year-old girl from Mexico who was brought to the United States by smugglers. She's now living in a hotel in Colorado, and she's being forced to do sex work. Her whereabouts were revealed after a relative from Mexico followed the smugglers and tipped off federal agents. So that is a factual scenario of someone who might be eligible for a T visa. All right. The next case I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Tim, is a case called SIJ. It's Special Immigrant Juvenile Status. This is a type of lawful status that's available to youth, so individuals under 21 years of age, who cannot be returned to one or both of their parents because of abuse, neglect, abandonment, or some other similar basis in New York law. They have to be unmarried, again, under 21, and it would also not be in their best interest to return to their country of origin. Often this is due to risks to their health and safety. In these cases, there are two parts. They start in family court, and a relative or a potential guardian petitions for custody or guardianship in family court. And then a motion is made in family court requesting that the court make the findings that we just kind of went over. They're under 21, they're unmarried, they can't be returned to one or both parents due to those bases that I went over, and it's not in their best interest to return to their country of origin. And once we have that order, we can apply to USCIS for SIJ relief. So I'm going to share a SIJ example with you all. All right. So here we have Daniela, who came to the United States with her mother to escape an abusive father. Daniela's father physically and sexually abused her mother, and often physically abused Daniela. Daniela and her mom were apprehended by ICE when they arrived in the United States, and they were let go. They were allowed to remain here under an order of supervision and placed into immigration court proceedings. After coming to the United States, Danielle's mother became ill and passed away. Daniela's aunt and uncle lived in the same town, and she went to live with them. Daniela's aunt and uncle want to petition for guardianship, and the case is referred to us, and we file the guardianship petition and make that motion for special findings to start that process for Daniela. Now, even if the facts were different and Daniela's mother hadn't passed away, it's possible that her mother still could have petitioned for custody of Daniela, because here her father physically and sexually abused Daniela, and there's also with Daniela's mom's death an additional SIDG ground. So if the facts were different and Daniela's mother was still alive, she still could be, she would still be a SIDG candidate. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to you again, Tim.
All right. Thanks again, Jillian. So the next case, or kind of case that I hope to talk about, is called a self-petition under the Violence Against Women's Act. I'm mostly going to talk about it in the context of a married couple, although I'll just note that a child or actually a parent of a citizen or permanent resident could also be eligible. But but the main way we see this case is you have a married couple and one spouse, usually, well, the abusing spouse is a United States citizen or permanent resident, but no family petition was ever filed. And that's a common way that people can immigrate to the U.S. is through family relationships. And often this situation leaves the spouse without lawful status particularly vulnerable. But the basic requirements for this kind of case is that there was a good faith marriage. The couple resided together or lived together in the United States. The undocumented spouse suffered abuse or extreme cruelty during the marriage. The applying spouse is a person of good moral character. And then in some cases, there's, when people come to us, maybe they've already left the marriage or even divorced. And you can still apply for this kind of relief if the divorce hasn't been finalized for 2 years prior to filing the petition. And then just a note about children. If there's a child who does not have lawful status, immigration status, who was abused by a citizen or permanent resident parent, they can apply. The abuse occurred when they were under the age of 21 and they're currently unmarried, and they can apply before the age of 25 as long as the abuse was one of the reasons they didn't file before they turned 21. So with that, we'll go over a quick example. I'll wait for Jillian to pull up the screen. So one of the ways we might see this case uses Rosa as an example. So she met her citizen husband, Brad, after coming to the United States in 2017. She came with her 2 young children to give them a better life and fleeing gang violence and abuse in Honduras. After dating for 6 months, Rosa and her children moved in with Brad. And shortly after moving in together, Brad proposed, and they got married quickly a few months later. Rosa was very happy as she thought Brad was really great with her kids and treated her well. But after they got married, things began to change. Brad began drinking and not coming home after work. When he did come home, he became violent and accused Rosa of cheating on him. Things got worse every day, and Rosa called the police one day after Brad assaulted her when he came home after work. She obtained an order of protection in criminal court and also filed for an order of protection in the family court after consulting one of our partner agencies and our office. And so that Rose would be eligible because, she, married Brad with all intents of staying together with him. They lived together in the United States, and then the abuse took place during the marriage. The last thing that's not really covered by the hypo is we'd have to show that Rose is a person of good moral character, and there's a variety of different kinds of evidence that we use to show that. And we'll go on to the next kind of case, which is referred to as a battered spouse waiver. It is a very closely related case to the self-petition, but in this kind of case, the abusive spouse actually did file the paperwork for the previously undocumented spouse to become a citizen. But in situations where the couple hasn't been married for 2 years, they're given a conditional residency or a green card. And that just means, because the government is so concerned about sham marriages, they make you come back within 2 years and show that, it's still a good faith marriage and you've done everything that they expect a married couple to do. Of course, the clients that we see, sometimes some abuse takes place during those first 2 years of marriage, and the possibility of applying sort of cooperatively after those 2 years is no longer an option. So there's this kind of case, which we call a battered spouse waiver, that allows the abused spouse to apply by herself or himself. And so the requirements are basically the same, that there was a good faith marriage and that the battering or extreme cruelty occurred during the marriage. And we'll go over a quick example that Jen will bring up. So in this case, Fatima met her citizen husband Adnan in Pakistan after their families arranged a meeting and a marriage. Adnan sponsored Fatima's application for a conditional green card after they married, and Fatima joined him in the United States. Shortly after arriving in the United States, Adnan began locking Fatima in her room all day and demanded sex when he arrived home from work. If she resisted, he beat her. One day while he was at work, Fatima contacted our partner agency, who helped her enter a shelter and obtain an order of protection in family court. And then she was referred to our office for legal assistance. I'll just note here that one of the difficulties that we might come across in a case like this is the sort of cultural difficulties that might arise in sort of demonstrating the good faith marriage in an arranged marriage, which of course happens in some other cultures, but it's a bit different than what the deciders at USCIS will expect sometimes. So we have to go a little bit above and beyond to show good faith marriage in those cases. And lastly, wanted to briefly talk about asylum, which most often we see in immigration court as sort of a defense to being removed, although you can also apply outside of court to the asylum office as well. There's kind of a long legal definition here, but I'll basically just say that so someone here is outside of their home country and they have a fear of returning to their country of origin. You have to show that that is language is well-founded, but basically that the person has a subjective fear himself or herself, and then also because of the country or the conditions in the home country, it's also sort of reasonable to fear going back. The person must fear going back because of the government or an entity that the government can't control. And in a case that we make, it's gotten more difficult to make, but we make is something like intimate partner violence that is widespread in society for historical, cultural reasons, but that it's so widespread and not taken seriously that it's beyond the scope of whatever the specific relationship is, but it is more of a societal widespread problem. There's sort of, I'll move on with the caveat that these cases are quite complicated and we could spend a lot of time on asylum cases, but that's the basic gist of it. There is a 1-year filing deadline to file an application for asylum, and that is whether you have entered without inspection and the government doesn't know you're here, or if you were stopped at the border and put into immigration court. Either way, you have to file that application within 1 year to be eligible. There's a couple of alternative options if you miss that deadline, but neither one of them are as favorable. Primarily because if you file for asylum, that can potentially lead to permanent residence, which is not an option for those other kinds of cases. So with that, I'll go over a quick example and hopefully that'll help clarify this a little bit. I'll wait for Jillian to bring it up. Okay, so in this example, Maria came to the United States from Peru with her young daughter. In Peru, Maria suffered physical, sexual, and psychological abuse with her partner, who's also the father of her daughter. Her partner was an abusive alcoholic. He often came home on the weekends drunk after being out with his friends all day. When he came home, he often demanded sex from Maria, and if she refused, he became physically and verbally abusive. He beat her and threw household items at her, anything near him, like plates, for example. He told her that she was his property and that he had to do what he wanted. In the past, he had forced himself on her physically while her daughter was in the same room. He told Maria that if she didn't want to make things worse, she should just do what he wanted. Maria then went to the police to report being beaten and raped, but her complaint is not taken seriously. The police do take a statement, but they don't follow up and nothing happens to her partner. When her partner finds out that Maria went to the police, he beats her again severely. She doesn't know what to do, and so she just sort of tries to endure her situation for a while longer until there's another violent episode and she decides she can't stay any longer. She doesn't have any family that can help her in her own country in Peru, but she has talked to a friend over Facebook who has come to the United States but is from her neighborhood and offered to help her if she ever came to the United States. And so Maria decides to leave Peru. She's able to purchase a flight to Mexico with her daughter, where she finds a group of people who are also traveling to the United States border. She crosses the border through the desert near Nogales, Arizona. She is quickly stopped by Customs and Border Patrol, and she tells the officer that she fears returning to her home country. After a couple of days in detention, she is released so that she can stay with her friend here in Orange County, and she's given an NTA, which is called a notice to appear, and is the charging document in immigration court. And from there, she can basically sort of state all the reasons she is afraid to return to home country, and a judge will eventually decide if she's eligible for asylum or not. And with that, that sort of concludes the main portion of our presentation. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Jillian, before we turn over to the next speaker.
Yeah, so the only thing, thanks Tim, the only thing I would add is that, you know, these cases are complicated and we're here to help. So again, we can help individuals who are victims of crime, domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. That is the main requirement for us. So we are often getting questions about things like public charge or the green light law regarding driver's licenses. if you have someone like that, who maybe does not have, you don't necessarily think that they have a legal issue that we just kind of went over, we can still provide advice and guidance for folks on those issues. So I would very much encourage you to make a referral on those issues as well. And Anouti is going to put up our contact information at the end. I would just note that Sharon Ramos, who's our wonderful paralegal and is bilingual, is our point of contact for intakes, and we will share that information at the end. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jillian, Tim, and Sharon. We really do appreciate all the information you were able to provide us. It is a wealth of information, and I absolutely will put up the contact information for everyone to have and take a picture of or write down at the end. Finally, I'd like to introduce Darlene De Jesus, who is the Community Affairs Coordinator and Assistant District Attorney with the District Attorney Office's Immigrant Affairs Initiative. Hi, Darlene. Can you share a little bit about what you guys are up to over there?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me just fine?
We can.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for the introduction. As Inaldi mentioned, I work for the District Attorney's Office. For those of you that don't know, our job at the District Attorney's Office is to prosecute crime. Traditionally and typically speaking, those crimes and charges come from the police department, and then we ultimately prosecute them. We can bring forth charges ourselves, but typically they do come in from the police department. And it's our job to prosecute them, and for lack of better words, to prove that whoever's been charged is guilty in court. We do represent the interests of the victims and the County of Orange and State of New York. So in 2016, we started our Immigrant Affairs Initiative. And basically, we wanted to encourage immigrant victims to report crimes where they've been victimized. We recognize that there is that hesitancy and that distrust towards any government systems, particularly when it involves the police and the District Attorney's Office. But we want to educate victims that they do have rights. If they've been the victim of the crime, regardless of their status, they can still come forward with those charges. They have a right to live without being victimized, and they have a right to report crime to their local police station without being turned away. And they also have a right to have the police or the District Attorney's Office investigate any crimes they may have committed against them. You don't have to speak English, and your legal status does not matter. And we also recognize that not only do you have rights as an immigrant or an undocumented, but also a lot of times those parties are targeted because of their status. We know that there is a lot of people that hold themselves out to be attorneys or other representatives that work with as immigrant officials, and they make representations that they can help someone obtain their status. And these people give their money and then they get defrauded. So our office, we have prosecuted and investigated those types of crimes, and we basically want to get the word out that our priority in those situations would be to prosecute the people that are defrauding others. In addition, we understand that the criminal justice system is a very complicated system, and it's not easy to understand. It's hard to navigate through, even as a person being born here and raised here speaking English. If you're not an attorney and not a criminal attorney in particular, the system can be hard to navigate. So in our office, myself and Bob Confetti are the point of contacts to help anyone that may be the victim of a crime who has charges pending, but they kind of don't understand their role or how their case is proceeding. So Bob and I take that extra time to sort of explain to that immigrant basically, what's going on with their cases and why. And we also just work to make sure that cases are not slipping through the cracks, that basically justice is met. Tim talked about basically some cases not being taken seriously. And so we want to make sure that we are an additional avenue. If you tried to go to the police department and you felt that was the case, that you weren't being taken seriously, give us a call. We'll take a second look at that case and see what's really going on and make sure that you are being taken seriously. Lastly, we, the U visas, which Jillian talked about, we are certifying officials. So we can play a role in certifying cases in U visas where there has been an arrest and we have prosecuted or investigated a crime. As long as the victim was cooperative and it's a qualifying crime, we will be signing off on that U visa. You know, different offices have different policies. Our office, we take the position that if you meet the requirements, we're going to be certifying that. I know I've also had the opportunity in different outreach environments to meet people that have been victimized, had cooperated with our office and had a qualifying crime, didn't know about U visas. We took a second look at their case. Turns out that they were qualifying. But like Jillian mentioned, there's different components with respect to the U visa. You know, it's not an end all be all. You know, it's another process which I have very limited information about. But we've been able to, in the past, get those victims in touch with immigrant attorneys who were able to basically represent them free of charge when we were able to do that by partnering with Catholic Charities in the past. That's all I have. I do speak Spanish as well. Our office does have language services capability. So if it's a different language other than English or Spanish, we still do have language services available. And Inaldi has my contact information as well. Feel free to provide that.
Thanks so much, Darlene. Really appreciate it. So we did have one question in the chat box, and this is an opportunity for anybody from the participants who would like to ask any questions. We are at the end of our program. The question was in regards to resources. They want to know what advice do we have for folks in the situation, undocumented immigrants who have no access to relief for lost income due to COVID-19, what access or what services can they access? So Erin, to answer your question, most, if not every single nonprofit right now is providing assistance to anyone, regardless of documentation status, around things like access to food or assistance with food insecurity. There are some agencies that also provide assistance with helping pay bills or helping pay rent when it comes up, when the issue of eviction comes up. But the Human Rights website actually does have a link to resources where there are a couple of different documents filled with resources for local agencies. And that is through partnerships and collaborations that we've had in the last couple of months and making sure that we compile that information for you all. So thank you for your question. It is highly appreciated. So as promised, the contact information for our presenters and the agencies that we worked with. I want to just, really thank every single person who joined us on this call today. I also want to thank the participants for taking the time to give the community this information. This will be, as I mentioned earlier, is being recorded and we will share it out widely, especially during times right now where everyone is doing work virtually. We know that it's really awesome to be able to just click on demand when we're able to watch and listen. These really great forums on information for our community. If you would like more information on the Orange County Human Rights Commission or the Cultural Equity Task Force, which I am very lucky to be partnering with on this information, please, on this forum, please feel free to email me at iesposito@orangecountygov.com. To contact Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, we've got both their phone numbers there for Sharon and also emails for Sharon and Jillian. And then also to contact Darlene over at the Immigrant Affairs Initiative from the DA's office. That's their phone number. And again, you can find a link to this recorded forum, other resources, and other recorded forums that we have had by visiting the orangecountygov.com website. So feel free to take a picture or screenshot this image so that you can have it. We will also be sharing this with everyone once we have the link to the recording. But really, thank you all. Thank you, participants, and thank you, presenters. Really appreciate everyone's information. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.